What is an access list? How is it used? And why do we need them on computer networks? More importantly, how do they help us with security issues or securing our computer network? More on this. I'm Clint Garrett, Ace Networker, and we're going to talk about that coming up.
You are not allowed to watch this video.
Okay, so we're not allowed then, or... Okay, well anyway.
So we've looked at firewalls and how firewalls are used to prevent certain traffic into a network or out of a network, or even certain devices from connecting externally, usually over the internet, to anything, or to prevent external devices from accessing computers and devices inside the network. Access lists are a minor step down from firewalls, but access lists allow for giving you a huge amount of control over the traffic flow throughout your network.
You are now allowed to watch this video.
Good, so we are allowed then.
Access lists are typically configured or programmed onto routers, although you will sometimes see them on layer 2 or layer 3 switches. So we won't get into too many of the nitpicky details here about access lists, but we will go over the basics of what they are and how they operate to give you the best 30,000-foot view of them and their function on a network. Again, you will typically see access lists used on layer 3 devices or routers, sometimes on layer 2 devices like switches, and they're used to set up a list of parameters that inbound and outbound traffic must follow to be allowed to pass over or through certain connections. An access list is, at its most basic function, a filter. It's a list of conditions that categorize packets, either inbound packets coming into a router or outbound packets leaving the router to travel elsewhere on the network. Access lists can be fantastic for exercising more finite control over network traffic, and you'll find that using access lists are the best tool of choice for decision making for traffic control. 3 of the most common uses for access lists are security, and security is a big one, determining which network will or won't be advertised by dynamic routing protocols from, say, one router to the other routers on the network, and categorizing packets for queuing or QoS, quality of service type services, or which packets can, for instance, activate a very pricey and potentially costly ISDN link, for example. So what do we mean by all of that? Well, let's look at the first most common reason or usage for access lists: security. Let's say we had a router on a campus with multiple LANs, local area networks, connected to it from all over the campus. You can configure access lists or program them into a router to filter unwanted packets when implementing security policies. Examples might be regulating traffic patterns so that they'll only allow certain hosts to access www resources on the internet, while constricting others. Used correctly, network managers can arm themselves with the power to enforce just about any security policy using access lists. Maybe in one area of your network you've got a server that, for security reasons above multiple other reasons, only needs to be accessed by a specific group of people or devices on another part of the network. Access lists can be used for that type of control and management as well. You can set up an access list on the router that only allows traffic from that specific group or devices to be passed through the router to that server connection, or in this example, the switch that the server is connected directly to. All other traffic is prohibited. The next common use I listed above was using access lists to determine which network will or won't be advertised by dynamic routing protocols from one router to the other routers. You can set up an access list that can be applied to a routing interface and limits or only allows certain types of routing advertisements to be sent out or accepted inbound. And thirdly, access lists can be used to categorize packets for queuing, for QoS type services, or to limit only certain devices accessing things like costly and pricey ISDN links, for example. So what is the basic functionality of an access list? When we create access lists, it's very similar to creating a series of if-then statements in programming. If a given situation is true or not, then a given action is taken. If that specific condition isn't met, nothing happens, and the next statement in that specific access list is executed. Access list statements are, for all intents and purposes, packet filters that packets are compared against, categorized by, and acted upon accordingly. Once you create an access list, you can apply it to either inbound or outbound traffic on any interface. When you apply an access list, it causes the router to analyze every packet crossing that interface. Now, over the years, I've compared access lists to the toy funnels some of us used to see or have as kids, with larger holes at the top, then smaller and smaller holes at each level until only the tiny spheres would make it all the way through and come out of the bottom. Access lists are very similar to this in that they are programmed into a router with line numbers. When an access list is referenced on an interface, filtering packets across it, the packets are compared to the first line in the access list, then sequentially to each line thereafter. If they meet the if-then, basically, statement in the access list, they are then compared to the next line in the access list. If no comparison matches the parameters in that line of the access list, nothing happens. In fact, the easiest analogy to compare access lists to on a network or routers on a network is like a traffic cop. They may only allow trucks through, for example, to a construction site, but not cars. Access lists are the traffic cops on a network. Now, we'll get into more fun details about access lists in other videos, but for this short video, just know that they are created in the configuration of a router, line by line, by you or whomever is creating the access list, and saved in the configuration. Then they are applied to an interface or to multiple interfaces to put them to work. If you enter an access list into the configuration of a router, but you don't activate it on any of the interfaces, physical or logical interfaces, it's not really doing anything as an access list. Here's an example of an access list created on a Cisco router using command line interface. The number of the access list is 42. Again, that's just using this example here. We assigned it access list number 42. Each line programmed into the access list when it was created in the configuration on this router specifies a different parameter each packet, again either inbound or outbound, must meet or be compared to in this access list. Here's an example of access list 42 being assigned to interface E3 for outbound traffic. Once applied, all outbound traffic packets are compared to each line in access list 42 before proceeding. So keep watching for more videos where I'm going to show you more details about access lists and how they work. I'll show you how they can be used to filter TTY or telnet traffic, trying to connect to devices on a network remotely. That's a good security use of access lists. I'll also show you more about what's called the implicit deny at the end of an access list and how to, as an admin or manager on a network, you need to be aware of the implicit deny when you're using access lists on your network or when you're setting them up.
You are now allowed to rewatch this video as many times as you like.
Great. You can watch this video as much as you want to now. You've made it through the access list, and you're good to go.